Hello, everybody, and welcome to this webinar organised by the Fashion Network and the E-commerce Club, and very kindly supported by Gorgias.com. The topic of this session is a customer experience masterclass for fashion retail professionals. This panel-based session is designed to give you additional knowledge and insights that you can then turn into valuable working practices. Just a few things to note before we get into the Q&A is that this is a live session and this is an interactive webinar, so please do get involved. If you have any questions or comments, if you could just pop them in the chat box rather than the Q&A, that would be helpful for us. So like I say, any questions or comments, pop them in the chat box. Alternatively, if you are like myself and the panelists prefer to speak, then you can click on the raise your hand feature and we'll be able to switch your audio feed on and you'll be able to talk to us directly. Just a word of warning though, if you do that, this session is being recorded and we'll be putting this on our YouTube channel at a later date, so your voice will be on there, just a word of warning. Speaking of which, if you do want to listen to this again, or you might want to share with a colleague or a line manager or something like that, then my colleague Mia will be sending an email around to everybody that's registered for this session. And there'll be a link in that to the YouTube channel. Finally, and immediately after this session, we'll be hosting a post-webinar debrief and virtual networking session for about 15 to 20 minutes. So if you want to come into that and meet the panelists or meet my colleagues at the Fashion Network or the E-commerce Club, then you're welcome to do that. That'll be starting at 3 p.m. GMT, and there'll be a link in the chat box towards the end of the session. So that's just an ideal opportunity to maybe get any questions that you didn't perhaps get answered, and also maybe do a little bit of networking, exchange your emails and all that sort of stuff. Speaking of the chat box, I just wanted to check with my colleague that the chat box is live. If it is, then we would be delighted that you could let us know in that very chat box where you're from in the world and what it is that you do. So if you could just make use of the chat box and just let us know where you're from in the world and what it is that you do. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to give the sponsor a plug. So today's sponsor is Gorgias, and they are sponsoring this session because they are a customer service platform that is designed for e-commerce merchants and built to support all the tools in the stack. Their product unifies support over email, live chat, voice, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and SMS, all in one feed, and it's helped to let merchants provide much more cohesive customer service experience. I'm told that the Gorgias tool works neatly with Shopify, BigCommerce, and Magento if you indeed use those platforms. So that's our sponsor, Gorgias. If you are in the market for such a service, there you are, their branding's up on the screen. If you are in the market for such a service, then I'm sure you guys, the guys at Gorgias, would be delighted to hear from you. And Neil, I don't know if you want to pop your email in the chat box, that'd be great. So that's our sponsors. Ray, thank you for supporting today's session. A little bit about myself. My name is Dale Hicks. I'm one of the co-founders here at the Fashion Network, and I will be chairing today's session. And joining me on the panel, we've got an all Scottish lineup today. So we've got a session, 2 Scots chaired by a Welshman. I'm sure there's a joke in there somewhere, chaps. First up, we've got Neil Forrest, who's the strategic partner manager at Gorgias. Prior to joining Gorgias, Neil worked as a digital consultant for a variety of e-commerce agencies, and he worked to help deliver growth to direct-to-consumer brands. Having worked across multiple e-commerce platforms, Neil found himself specializing in Shopify Plus and has actually launched his own e-commerce brand, Tartan Scarf Company, which is...
Again, suitably Scottish.
I beg your pardon?
Said again, suitably Scottish.
Suitably Scottish, there we go. And I believe you get all your stuff designed and manufactured up in the Highlands, am I right?
That's correct.
Good. Outside of work, though, Neil has a little bit of a hobby. I didn't know this about you, Neil, that you're a bit of a muso and you play drums and piano. Is that correct?
Yeah.
There you go. Well, so did I many moons ago, actually, but we'll have a chat about that at a later date. But he's also a sailing fan and loves to travel. Alongside Neil is fellow Scot Martin Lucas, who is an author and CEO of Gap in the Matrix. Gap in the Matrix is a human and software personalization engine Martin is a sneakerhead and also has a custom sneaker business. He's also published 4 books, written a paper for the Prime Minister, and received accommodation for charity work for the Home Secretary, something I didn't know about you either, Martin. So we're all full of surprises today. Before we begin, though, we've got a poll that my colleague is just going to publish, and it'd be great if you guys out there can just respond to this. So it should be going live any second. And the poll is basically, what do you think is an average response time for fashion brands? So within the hour, 24 hours, or 48 hours plus. So just if you could just fill that out. I'm just going to have a quick look to see who's out there in there. So we've got quite a few people in here from across, well, from all over here. So yeah, so that would be, I'm just curious to know what you guys think all the answer might be on this one. We'll have any guesses? I reckon since the middle one. Are we ready to go live on that, Mia? There we go. So what do you think is the average response time? And majority of our respondents have put 24 hours. Neil, does that come at any surprise to you? What's your thoughts on that? You're on mute, by the way, sorry.
Whoops. So no, to be honest, it doesn't. The average response time for most brands is somewhere between 12 and 24 hours. And it increases, obviously, during peak trading. As brands tend to get more tickets, that time increases. So at the moment, in Q4 and sort of into January, the average response time does tend to end up closer to the 24-hour mark.
Right, okay.
If all brands had customers responding within the hour, that'd be fantastic.
And I'm sure we were chatting before this session that you said there's a time window where you get a huge drop off. Would you say what would you say?
Yes, but I mean it's much less. I think the one that we were talking about was the conversion rate for pre-sales questions that come through the live chat channel or even the SMS channel. And this is data from Gorgias. Bear in mind, we get over 100 million tickets a year, so it's a lot of data. The conversion rate for pre-sales chats answered in under 10 minutes is 28%. Then after that, it drops off quite quickly. But it is possible to answer very simple questions that quickly.
Right. Okay. So obviously the topic of today's session is all about customer experience. But before I start, I just want to sort of like get an idea from both of you. Maybe I'll come to you on this, Martin. Just who do you feel out there is doing this well at the moment? And I'll come to you after that, Neil, if that's okay. Martin, who would you say is doing it well?
Can I go the other way?
Go on. Who's not doing it well?
Yeah. Only because it sticks in my mind because it's been going on for so long is End Clothing. They have such a slow response rate. And what triggered what I just said is what Neil just said, right? So for me, I spend my life working with consumer brands, right? And what my business specializes in is clothing, jewelry, and beauty, right? So if you think about what they are from a psychological point of view, and that's what we do, a lot of the human sciences, they're 3 of the most emotional purchases that we make because they're how we create our identity, right? What makeup we put on, what clothing we put on, what jewelry we put on, etc. And End have one of the worst and slowest response rates. And I cannot tell you how many hundreds of pounds it stopped me spending with them to the point that I'm now no longer a customer. It's destroyed their loyalty with me, even though they carry some brands and some rare brands. And you mentioned I'm a sneakerhead and they do sneaker raffles and things like that as well. So I don't mean to give a negative response just for the sake of it. I think what Neil said, bear in mind that, as I said, we're all about conversion optimization. That's what we're doing for our consumer clients. It's amazing what you can do when you act on something as quickly as possible with quality, because when you don't, the reason why you get such a drop-off that Neil mentioned is that people don't feel cared about. Because they might not be complaining. They might just be saying, is this true to size? You know, a Bathing Ape is one of my favorite brands. Not everybody knows that a large and Bathing Ape is actually a medium, or Comme des Garçons do exactly the same thing, right? this is my point, is like, I don't think people think about CX as how can I help a customer? How can I make them be more loyal? I think they still think about it as a complaint line too much. I still think we're caught in that kind of call center age of the late 90s, you know?
Neil, you're nodding away there. Do you want to add to this? Is anyone you want to sort of commend or?
It's interesting to hear about end clothing. I mean, all I'm thinking is I'm going to start contacting them to see how we can improve it. But in terms of who's doing it well, fashion-wise, there's one that springs to mind. It's Auger, like a Dutch brand.
Yeah.
So like luxury fashion, like they have people who spend thousands or tens of thousands with them on sort of bespoke fashion pieces, and they also have an in-store experience that is very important to them, and so they want to make sure that people are getting that same experience in store and online. And so one of the ways that they did that was really focus on automation and personalization at scale, and really reducing two key metrics, which was the first response time and the resolution time as well. So like working to sort of automate basic questions, stuff that, like Martin mentioned, the different sizing between brands. People often ask about size. If you can automatically respond in seconds with information on sizing, as opposed to having to wait for a human to do that, then that customer gets a much better customer experience. It's much easier for the brand because they don't have to allocate resource to answering that basic question. And then the customer is far more likely to convert. And that's exactly what Auger have seen, is that by cutting down the first response time and resolution time through sort of basic automation, they've seen increases in revenue and conversions.
Can I please add to that? Oh, sorry.
Course, yeah.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
So just for everybody's purpose, a lot of people will assume that Neil and I know each other because we're both Scottish. That's not the case. This is the first time that we've properly met today, but I had a good look at his service, as you tend to do when you come on panels. You see who you're dealing with. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed about looking at Neil's service and how he was just speaking is that he's thinking about bots and talking about bots based on customers, what they're trying to buy and what they're trying to think, right? Whereas most bots are just based on, where is my order? Where is my delivery? And they're all based on negative problems. Whereas what Neil just said seems so fundamentally simple, and yet it's not being done by anybody, is why don't we load up the size of all the brands that we have? Because it's already in our catalog. So then if somebody asks the bot, is this a traditional size, and they can answer it, then that's a positive experience. This is my point about stop thinking about CX as being negative and thinking about it as a channel, as a way to speak to the customer like they're a human, not a defense mechanism like it's a call center complaint,
Yeah.
With that in mind, then, in your utopian world, what does the perfect customer experience look like then? I'll come to you on that, Neil, actually, and we can talk both on and offline, but do you know what I mean? I ended up having a row for about 2 days with a bot. Didn't realize it was a bot, but a few days ago, but I just got hugely frustrated with whole spirits. But sorry, go on.
No. I think what you've just mentioned is important. Like, any brand that uses automation shouldn't rely purely on automation. There has to be a balance between the automation and the human touch, because there's always going to be people who either hate using a channel like live chat and automating and getting an automated response to anything because they simply won't trust it. That's fine. But if that's the case, then they still need to receive a great customer experience via that human touch point as well. So the brand should really use all the sort of tech at their that's available to them to help with that. I guess the ideal utopian world would be brands find the questions that they are being asked most often and that they feel can be automated, that suit their workflow, that suit their product, whatever it might be, and they automate those. And then they make it as easy as possible for the brands, for customers to reach out to the humans. And in doing that, what they've ended up with is the human resource has much more time to focus on the more complex queries, and then the people who want to get fast instant answers from the automated channels can do that as well. So find it.
You want to add to that at all? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want the whole session to be about bots, right? But let's try and close the door a little bit on the bots. I call this the kind of bonsai tree mechanism, right? Is that what a lot of people are doing is and the reason I call that is the infrastructure is called a tree decision-making system, right? Yes, no, don't want this, do want this, don't want this, etc. Right? I think that people need to just have a look at what they're actually doing. And what Neil was saying was there's certain times you need to shorten the tree because they're asking a question that means they need a personal touch straight away. Whereas sometimes when they're just asking functional, practical questions, it's okay for the bot to help them 8 times in a row because the bot knows what they're doing. Where there's other times where somebody you can detect, particularly, and it's not hard with linguistics, by the way, it's not hard to add technology into this, where you can detect by somebody's tone or what they're asking or the length of what they're asking is that this needs to go straight to an agent. Just because the bot can doesn't mean that it should, right? So this is why I call it the bonsai tree, right? Because you need to shorten your bot to be as practical as possible in certain areas and let it grow and be long in others. And it's nothing more than applying I say nothing more, but one of the biggest frustrations I've got in life, which happens to pay a lot of bills for me, so it's not necessarily a frustration, but it's like people just don't seem to think about what it's like for the human on the other end. Like, what is it like? What would it be like for you as a consumer to go through this experience in your brand? It's a great question to ask, and people don't. What they're trying to do is to cut down the amount of human hours to save money, when actually it's costing them more money to do that, going back to Neil's 28% conversion optimization, right? So what we do is we tend to look at response times and the number of people that came into us, etc., but we don't know what the cost is because it's in the fluffiness. It's in the part that people don't understand because it's the human side, you know?
I love that analogy, Martin.
Yeah, you were nodding away there. Did you want to respond to that at all?
No, I think the only thing I would add on to that is the key, I think, lies in segmenting the pre-purchase questions and the post-purchase questions. And then after that, you can figure out what the rest of the tree likes. But that's what sits at the top of the tree. Is someone asking a question because they're thinking about buying, or they're asking a question because they've bought and they need an answer to whatever the question might be about product, about delivery. So if you can start to segment those two types of questions, then that starts to really help.
Before I move on then to my next question, is there anything else within the whole customer experience do you think we need to mention that makes it? And it's been interesting hearing both of you say actually that it should not always be about the negative, it should be about the positive, which, I kind of always assumed, maybe it's because we're British, I don't know, but you always think something's going to go wrong and you just want to moan. But is there anything else within this whole customer experience thing we need to mention before we move on, do you think? Obviously, we've talked about the actual speaking to the brand via either mechanical means or human means. Is there anything else that we need to touch on that comes into this, do you think, or not?
I've been saying the same thing for 20 years, is that you can't treat your staff like they're limited by rules. And what I mean by that is that when people are dealing with customers, so a human is dealing with a customer that happens to be human, right? So human to human, is we still do the computer says no stuff. We don't and I'm not talking about money and discounts. I'm talking about linguistics. I'm talking about the way that we speak to customers. We don't let our staff and our people follow our brand guidelines, but interact with people like we care. It's one of the biggest things. Like I've worked with over 60 different brands in my current company, and every single lookbook that I've looked at, they talk about, well, we'll frame it like this, and this is how the image looks, and this is the colors that we use. And I've never seen in over 60 brands, bear in mind, 100 million plus brands, never once seen anything about language. Not how to speak to customers in a customer service point of view, not how to speak to customers on a website. It's just a wild west. So you end up, oh, the agency speaks like this, the website speaks like this, and the customer experience too often just says, well, I can't help you because the rule book says X, Y, and Z. And often it pushes people away. It kills potential loyalty. People always talk about loyalty in general, right? But it kills potential loyalty because of how you speak to somebody. Because the way that works within the brain is loyalty in our association with brands. It works exactly the same lines as it works with friends. So the way we think about brands is the same way that we think about friends. So if a brand doesn't treat us in the right way or speak to us like we're a human, we don't want to go and hang out with them again. So we forget about them. And this is why brands drop off and die and things like that. It's not necessarily design. Often it's just the service that you put behind it.
You're talking about a human touch, basically, rather than just customers being seen as numbers and stats.
The irony is that the human touch doesn't have to be done by a human, because the human can write the bot, right? So there's a human touch that goes into the bot, and it's personal and it's friendly and it's fun. So what you said was right. Fear drives too much human behavior across the world. So when we're assuming that something is going to be negative, whereas my order, don't use really neutral, negative language about it. Like, actually start by just saying, this is not our normal standard. Let me explain something to you. Let me understand what you're going through. Do you know what I mean? It's like you're just trying to humanize an experience in every touch of life. And I don't think it's difficult, but brands seem to find it impossible.
Well, you sort of touched on staff there a minute ago. That's actually one of my questions coming up next. It's like, whose responsibility within the brand is it to drive this strategy? Do you know what I mean? Who? Neil, you're a little bit of a smile there. Do you want to pick this one up? Who's who within the brand? Yeah, because when we do webinars like this, I've done a lot of consultancy with brands, and sometimes these sorts of roles get lost around the company. But in your view, whose role within your sort of average e-commerce business is it to oversee this?
Well, I guess it depends on the size of the brand for starters, but I meet a lot of like e-com brand owners. And quite often I'll ask them, do you do customer service? Are you actually in the weeds with customer service? And I reckon about 75% of them have said at one time or another, they have been responsible for customer service. And the majority of them all believe that it is important that they are still involved to a degree. Even if it's not answering tickets on a daily basis, they still need to understand what the general sentiment is across the customer base, and that most of the time comes from customer service. The other point I think I want to make is that brands, what was I going to say? It was on the tip of my tongue there. It's customer service. A lot of brands don't necessarily treat customer service as a priority. And I think it's important that all team members understand the importance of customer service in everything that you do.
Why is that though? Why is that in your experience? Why is it not at the forefront of it? Because I was taught in marketing that the customer always comes first. I mean, why do you think that is?
I think it's because people. Martin maybe has a better answer to this, but I think it's because people are so focused on their jobs. Maybe they've got KPIs that they're so focused on hitting, and they kind of have the blinkers on. Or maybe they don't have that top-down influence telling them, look, everyone is in customer service. Everyone as part of a company is in customer service to a degree. You're always representing the company. Maybe that.
Yeah. Martin, anything to add? Or should I move on to my next?
I mean, just building on what's being said, really, is that businesses are incredibly deeply even more siloed than what they used to be, right? And customer service is thought of as a back back of service support, not a front of service support, right? So advertising, marketing, the website, converting people, that's front end, that's getting their money, right? Whereas what we're not understanding about the back end is what are people saying and why. Like End Clothing, I can tell you, do not analyze their customer service, right? Because if they did, they would know that 99 out of 100 issues is with logistics. They don't communicate when things are going to be delivered. They do split deliveries. They don't tell you when they split a delivery. When a split delivery arrives, it makes you think that the other product has been forgotten about. When you make an inquiry about it, it generally takes 4 days for them to come back to you. And then they don't really know what's happened with the split product, and it's all logistics. So what you've actually got is a problem that's not customer service. If you've got, I would imagine at End Clothing, you've got a massive bunch of stressed out people. I know the owners want to grow it to be $1 billion brand. You've got stressed out people in operations, but nobody's actually looking at the responses. It's in the same way. I'll give away a little thing that we do on e-commerce is we look at the search terms that go into the website, right? And nobody does this. And it's such a simple thing. It's like, imagine if you knew what everybody was searching for on Google when it came to your product, right? You would have a clear idea about actually what type of product they want, what packaging they want, what look, what feel, but you don't have access to that. Google do, right? But on your website, when you look at the search functions, you suddenly realize, oh my God, people are searching for this brand over and over and over, and we only stock 50 of it when we should be stocking 500 of it, right? Apply that, and I do that as a simple example, right? Because that's a way for you to say, well, yeah, of course, we would stock more. If people were looking at the responses they were getting from customer service, good and bad, they would know what to do more of and what to do less of, including, for example, what we were speaking about earlier. They would realize, oh, we're not telling people about the size on the website. I still describe most e-commerce websites as like a product manual. Like we've gone from catalogs to spreadsheets to websites, right? And they don't give very much style advice. The sizing is very generalized. So it'll have a style chart, but it won't be about different specific brands. And this is the same with customer service. As Neil mentioned, you've got so many opportunities to speak to people and identify people and treat them in different ways and get indicators about where they're at in their journey or what they need. But we're just not applying to just ways of understanding how people are thinking.
Yeah.
I was on the verge of going on a rant, so I'm going to stop this.
Yeah, I was just going to maybe continue on with that a little bit, because I'm not here to sit and pitch Gorgias, but it did make me think of exactly like a particular feature that I see used really, really well in brands who take sort of the attitude that you were just talking about, Martin. And that is, coming back to whose role within the business is it? And if we can analyze all of that data that we're getting from customers, the customers through the customer service channels very, very easily, add tags if people are constantly asking about shipping, about size, about color, whatever it is. If we can get all that data very, very easily represented, then the brands who I see making the best improvements on a sort of almost monthly incremental basis are the brands that take that data, combine it with other data, and then that says, right, okay, we need to improve the product page copy, we need to improve the pre-sales questions, we need to find a new shipping supplier because this one's awful, whatever it might be, improving everything from page copy to operations. That can all be made so much easier if we've got that data. So
yeah,
if you can use the CX data available to you.
And the other thing about just to carry this on, right? Like from a human behavioral point of view, when you delight somebody and make them feel good, right? That's not the end of the CX opportunity. That's when the door gets opened, right? So you can imagine if you've just solved a problem with delivery for me, or if you just helped me understand the size of a product, or if you just give me a little bit of advice about, is this a sky blue color or is it more of a pastel blue color, right? That's when you can actually say to people a completely different question. You could say, I'm glad that I could help you. I was just wondering, do you think we should stock any other brands? Or do you look at the website and you wish that we had more of this color? Or is there any times that you wish that we had more of this, of less of this, or things that frustrate you? Like, it's a two-way opportunity. When you solve a positive problem, and this is called permission-based psychology, it's not, I'm trying to make it sound fancy, right? But what you're basically doing is, I've solved the problem for you, you're happy with me, so ask me a question. Don't just say this, because all that happens is there anything more I can help you with today? And of course, I'm going to say no, because I'm either annoyed and I don't want to speak to you anymore, or you've solved my problem. But why not ask me something more? Because it's the one thing that brands never do, because we're so siloed down. Like, when was the last time a brand asked you a question about anything that was not, give us a 5-star Trustpilot review that we delivered the product on time? You know what I mean?
People just want to be heard a lot of the time, don't they?
That's it.
You know? Yeah, which is quite interesting.
I've got it written on my notes: permission psychology, and then underneath it is the story to be told. That's what people want.
Well, I suppose in the smaller, an old-fashioned smaller business, a little boutique, all these things are going on naturally, aren't they? You know, but obviously when you're in the e-commerce world, then obviously you need tools like what obviously Neil's providing, but it's different. And I think sometimes people, like, obviously my background is marketing, and so, you know, it's marketing theory is quite basic. You know, your customers, you always listen to your customers. And I think sometimes people lose track of that. I was talking to a friend the other day about their business, and the two ways they get most customers is from people that walk past their premises, but secondly is from their customers. You know, the customer recommendations, and bad news spreads quicker than good news a lot of the time. I wanted to ask you both about personalization. I might just come to you first on this, Martin. What sort of role does, I know you do a lot of work in this space, but what sort of role does personalization play in all of this?
I mean, I'm on the verge of, after 7 years of work building email personalization that sends a one-to-one message to 1 million different people. So personalization I could talk about for years, right?
Okay. Well, we've only got half an hour. So.
Let's focus on CX and move away. I don't want to talk about my business and stuff like that.
No, that's fine. But
what I'd be interested in is, instead of giving somebody the option of opening a bot, I'd like a bot to automatically open and say, look, I'm here to help you with style. Is there a particular color? Is there a particular event? Is there a particular thing you want to do? And we actually did a test bot for this when we were building our initial structure. And what the bot was doing was asking the people, what event have you got going on? It was using natural language AI, which means it's like it's having a conversation. And then it started to suggest products by showing them pictures. And what we were trying to do was that the client was having a lot of problem with footfall, but I had over 300 stores in the UK. So what we did was put together outfits, and we said, do you want to come into the store to try this stuff on? And they've just gone through the journey of picking it all. They said yes, they picked the time, they came into the store. And wherever we tested it, we got more than 50% increase in footfall from doing it.
Wow.
So my point is that customer service and personalization is not when the customer comes to you, it's what you can do for them in the first place. And the digital world has made it too much about, and now I sound old, the digital world has made it more like, I'm only going to act when you act online. Whereas if you came into my store, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to see where I can help you, right? So I think we need to look at ways of how we can be proactive, how we can help people, and also how we can look at products like what Neil does exceptionally well differently.
Yeah.
He's not there just to solve a problem. He's there to make companies money and to enable positive change.
Yeah.
I mean, in marketing terms, what we call as an experience to provide that, because we're in that experiential marketing age now, aren't we?
Right.
We're not just shifting products. Like you said earlier, brand is an emotional aspect to buying a brand, whether it be fashion or otherwise.
Final thing about personalization, then I'll be quiet, but for a bit. we're moving into a world of hyper personalization, right? So I've got a custom sneaker brand, right, which means that only one pair gets made for a person in the world. I'm dealing with $1 billion. One of my main clients is $1 billion jewelry brand. and they've got a thing that, let's say your grandmother passed away a long time, but you've got a photograph of her wearing a necklace. You can take that photo, give it to them, and they will make a plastic prototype. You'll check that it looks the same, and then they will create that necklace, and it costs the same price as buying a normal product off the shelf. That's the world we're moving to. It's hyper-personalization. And hyper-personalization also comes into customer service. If you treat me like an individual, I'm not the same as Dale. I'm not the same as Neil, right? I have different needs and different ways of being treated. So give me the opportunity to be treated in the way that I need to be treated. Help me solve the problem the way I need to solve the problem. And particularly because I spend so much time in fashion, is that most people don't know how to style themselves. Help them, right?
I've experienced that. People just want to talk to you and get validation about, does this look good on me?
Right.
It's an art in itself, isn't it?
What's beautiful about what I don't know if Neil's ever described his business like this. Like I said, we literally just met on this call, but it's its own form of therapy, right? Because if you're going to somebody that you don't know, could be a bot, could be a customer service agent, either way, right? And you're saying, does this look good? Is this popular? Like, what kind of shape is it? Does it suit this type of body? You can express some of your own personal insecurities because you're speaking to somebody that doesn't know you, has no ability to reuse that data, and it's exactly the same way as therapy. And we've coded therapy into what we do with our personalization stuff, but I think it's even more important for the kind of stuff that Neil does, because people will tell you, if you offer them the chance to say, this is what I'll do to help you. All right, okay.
I'm very glad you brought this up. Actually, there's a perfect example that I can think of. This is a real life example that I saw in Gorgias, and someone, a lady reached out to a brand, one of our beauty brand customers, about a particular lip oil shade. In fact, no, sorry, she didn't reach out. This is all about being proactive. So this brand recognized that they were getting asked time and time again, what shade should I buy? So when someone landed on that product, a little pop-up said, do you need help? So this lady reached out and she was, expressed her vulnerability. She said, I'm 81 years old. After the pandemic, my skin is sallow and grey. I don't like these colors. This is my hair color. What shade should I choose? And then they had someone being really fast, responding directly to those campaigns. And this is just one example, but that campaign was converting at over 25%. So being proactive and being personal can see really, really high conversions. And generally those proactive chat campaigns that we see across all our customers convert between 10 and 25%, sometimes more.
Oh, wow.
So being proactive and then combining that with being fast can have real impact on revenue.
And you can create true personalization by taking what Neil said, making email responsive, meaning that you ask a question in the CRM that you send, right? Not having an email address that says we will not respond, right? Because that doesn't make people feel good. And also one of the first things that we do is that the world has completely forgotten about is that Instagram in particular, you can do it on all social channels, but Instagram, if you go and look at any of your favorite brands, nobody's asking any questions. It's a perfect opportunity to interact with your customers, find out what you're doing well, find out what products they want. And we use it as a product catalog. Sometimes it's using fancy videos and sometimes it's using things that I'm too old to even name. But the point is that if you don't ask people and you don't help people the way that Neil described, then you're leaving them to make up their own mind, right? Or they'll go to the brand that is giving advice about what shade to wear, or the brand that is giving the advice about what would be shapely for your body, right? Shapely for your body. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Okay, I wanted to ask a few more questions then, because obviously we're getting to the last 20. I want to come to you on this, Neil. We did speak about this briefly, I think, when we were organising this session, but just wanted to talk to you about merging the on and offline experience. Have you got any sort of like experience or case studies on how, because obviously in our industry, there are pure play retailers, there are bricks and mortar. I mean, nowadays, every bricks and mortar pretty much has an online experience. But can you talk us a little bit about merging those two experiences?
Yeah, I think the reason that, the very fact we're speaking about it, I think was probably accelerated by COVID. There's some really nice examples of brands who I would have traditionally said offered a pretty bad customer experience online, or maybe just a very average experience online, who were forced to level up. And although it's not fashion, the one that always sticks in my mind is Curry's PC World. Not a very sexy brand, but when it comes to customer experience, they do something really good, which is like live shopping, like live support shopping. So you can do like a video call with someone. And so their whole thing was, people can't come to the store, but we can have staff in store. Let's merge that experience. So merging the sort of online and offline there is one way that I've seen brands do that well. And I know that there are lots of nicer brands, shall we say, that are doing that as well. The other thing that I'm a big fan of is concierge services, and the sort of particularly in the luxury fashion space. So concierge services like Harper that offer try-on services. Again, merging that online and offline experience, buy and order online, take it offline, try it on, and then like within an hour sometimes. I think there's going to be a lot more brands moving towards that side of I don't know, like trying stuff on, particularly in luxury fashion.
Cool. Martin, anything to add to that or not? On an offline experience?
I think the biggest thing for me is that if you look at it from a strategic point of view, you've got to humanize the experience.
Yeah.
And what we've got going on in the world is that people buy a tool and they implement the tool and then they wait to see what the tool does. And we're fixing a lot of tools left, right, and center. And it sounds quite trite because people talk about AI all the time, but it's one of the biggest issues that we're fixing all the time. You can't just put in concierge service because it's based on AI, or you can't just put in automated emails because it's based on AI if it doesn't have a human understanding of what you're trying to do in the first place. Because I could mention reward cards and loyalty cards and give us your email and you'll get early access to stuff. Humans don't like doing it because they don't trust brands, because you're not humanizing it. You're making it seem like you'll get some mysterious thing from it, instead of saying, if you give me this, I'm going to give you this, right? And it'll literally be all the things that you would do in that concierge service, right? But if you don't tell them, what you're saying is, we offer a concierge service. Do you want to try it? I'll let you try on a shirt, right? What I'm saying is that I think that we've forgotten how to show that we want to make an effort, show that we want somebody's business, show that we care about it. And again, I'm using a lot of phrases that people still use too often, but it's the computer says no. It's treating people like numbers. I can't tell you the amount of systems that I've had to fix because people treat loyalty based on high spend, medium spend, low spend, and that's their entire data setup. What we show them is that a high spender, it could be, we did this the other day, we found that a high spender is an example where they were spending 11% of their clothing budget with the brand that we were dealing with, but because they were spending how they defined high loyalty, they thought this customer was high loyalty, and actually they were missing out on about £11,000. So this customer is going out and spending 11 more grand on clothing, but because they were spending X amount, they were defined as high loyalty. So we're letting numbers and technology and things like that, which are all wonderful things. AI can be great, technology is great, all those kind of things are wonderful, but you need to put the human in front of it in the first place, which is what Neil's talking about. Neil's just go to Neil about stuff. That's it.
Okay, I have a few more questions left. And guys out there listening, if you've got any questions or comments, then just pop them in the chat box and we'll answer them. I just want to talk, we've obviously spoke about a lot of this is about the online experience. We've talked a little bit about the offline experience, but from a sort of distance seller point of view, I want to talk a little bit about the last mile. I had a bit of an annoying thing this week where my parcel wasn't delivered to where it was supposed to be delivered. But is there anything either of you would like to see done better in sort of like what I would describe as the last mile, that whole kind of like your doorstep thing? Neil, you're nodding away there.
Well, literally 20 minutes before we jumped on this webinar, I got a delivery from Boots, and the whole package was soaking with mouthwash. So I'd just like my packages to arrive intact and not smelling minty fresh. But no, I think for me, the last mile, it's almost doing the basics well, and there's still some providers out there who really don't do the basics. And from that, I mean, by that I mean what consumers now expect to be the basics, like accurate tracking, get a time slot, being able to leave a message and say, okay, you'll leave it with a neighbor.
Yeah.
Maybe change the delivery address or change the delivery date. These are all things like people like DPD and like UPS, DHL, they're all offering as standard, but there's still more basic people like Royal Mail who aren't. So choose your courier wisely. Choose courier wisely.
It sounds like a huge moral of this whole conversation is communication. It's huge. We've got a question that's come in here from Matt, and it says, do you define high loyalty as regularly returning customers? Who'd like to pick that up?
I'll pick that up if you don't mind. We actually don't. What we define it as is understanding who each individual consumer is, right? Bear in mind, this has taken us 7 years and 4 years of R&D, and my whole business is about understanding how the brain shops and how it goes through different things. And there's quite a well-known jean brand that used to be really cool in the early 2000s and now isn't. And what they do is if a customer hasn't bought after 6 months, they drop them into the general pool of emails. So what's basically happened is that they've lost the relationship with the customer, and now they're going to make it even worse because they're going to treat them in general, right? So they just get general communication. Whereas a lot of people shop based on the frequency of what suits them. And that's what we get to understand. So the fact that somebody's coming to you once every 4 months is not the worst thing. And they could be perfectly loyal for doing that. So it's not about frequency. It's not always about how much money somebody spends, because people have different interests, different budgets, and different ways of shopping. And we understand those things, that these are the services, part of the services that we offer. So just remind me about the question from Matt.
Do you define high loyalty as regularly returning customers?
Yeah, no, so I don't. So I define.
You could have said that. You could have said that.
Yeah, no, but I like to waffle. I defined high loyalty. We've got a number of different markers with it. It's the frequency of somebody coming back to you. Sometimes people will look at like we've got a client case study. I can't mention their name, but they're mainly known as a jeans company.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a cluster of 120, they're huge, 125,000 people, right, who only bought their jeans full price, and the same 125,000 people only bought their t-shirts at a discount.
Okay.
Right? So everybody does things in different ways and thinks about things in different ways. So how you define loyalty is up to you as a person, not based on particular rules of a brand. Like if I don't open your CRM for 4 weeks, it's not because your CRM's bad or I don't like you. I might only shop once every 6 weeks. I think if you looked at it the other way round, I think brands need to entertain more. I think we've got too used to let's sell at the lowest price possible. Yeah. And I've got a good relationship with Rory Sutherland, the vice chairman of Ogilvy. And he said that he believes the digital economy has got to the point where and this is the vice chairman of Ogilvy, so I'm going to do a direct quote, so apologies for the swearing. He said that we've got to the point that we're just going to sell shit to people that were going to buy it anyway, but we're giving them a discount.
Sounds like a business philosophy.
Right.
Yeah.
Not a good one.
You've dealt with a question from Roisin, haven't you, Neil? There, Roisin, you're more than welcome, by the way, to join us immediately after. We'll have a bit of a debrief if you have any more questions or you want to chat to Neil directly. So there'll be a link going in the chat box. So just to remind you all out there listening, we're going to have a quick debrief, bit of a virtual networking thing. So if you want to come and join us, that'll be a little bit of a link will be going in the chat box shortly. So I was just going to move on to sort of like the last bit of this session now. We've got 10 minutes to go. I just want to see I want to sort of get an idea from both of you, what sort of trends now we see. Now, we spoke a lot about this, the human aspect of this whole thing, the fact that we should be communicating with customers. Yes, there are tools on the market, like what obviously you guys do at Gorgias. But I want to sort of talk about just general trends that we're finding in CX and what sort of trends that you might see happening over the next 2 to 3 years. Neil, can I come to you first on that sort of general trends?
I mean, interestingly, I'm surprised this hasn't come up yet, because almost in every conversation I have with people, the cost of acquisition or the rising cost of acquisition seems to be a big focus, and therefore the trends that we're going to see are brands focusing way more on retention. So absolutely, brands looking at customer experience. We're already, like at Gorgias, we're already seeing brands pay more attention to it, to things like loyalty, reviews. How can we make more from the customer base that we already have instead of spending a lot of money to acquire new customers? And a big reason for this, in our research, is that repeat customers tend to generate, depends on the brand, on average about 300% more revenue than one-time customers. And brands actually sometimes aren't profit making from until customers maybe second to fourth purchase, depending on the average order value. So the main trend that I think we're going to see is brands focusing on retention. And I think we'll experience that as consumers as well. I think we'll start to see more attention from brands. We'll probably start to see higher frequency in communication and hopefully higher quality in communication in order to reflect what they're wanting from us, which is more money in exchange for, the whatever it is that they're offering.
Better service.
Better service, yeah.
Martin, have you got any, do you want to add to what he's just said there, or in terms of what sort of trends you might expect? I mean, in a weird way, it's frustrating that you say it is going to be a trend, because I always thought good customer service should just be a standard, no?
Yeah, I actually think in terms of trend, that's a really good point. I hadn't thought of it. I hope it's not a trend. I hope it's just a turning point.
Yeah, a turning point. Because I mean, I'm with you all the way. It just should be something at the forefront of every retailer's mind. And perhaps we got caught up in this whole e-commerce revolution over the last 10, 15 years, and everyone is just out to acquire. It's basic rule of marketing. Just look after you. What was the word of mouth spreads, doesn't it? Martin, did you want to add to this in terms of the whole trends?
The past 6 sales prospects I've spoken to, the biggest problem they've got is they spend a fortune on acquisition and they can't get anyone to come back. Right. And the reason being is that Puma is my favorite example of this. Puma had a semi-annual sale recently, and I still can't figure out what that means. I don't know which month or part. Like, I can't figure out what a semi-annual sale means. Right. My actual point about trends is that I agree with Neil in that let's forget about customer service. Let's forget about brands. Let's forget about sales for a second, right? Because one of the biggest indicators you can get about what the world wants is how the world is changing. And the world is changing to want to know the efficacy of a product. Was it made by a 4-year-old, right? Is it sustainable? Is it secondhand? You've got a lot of big brands starting to do like secondhand, sustainable, upcycling, recycling, things like that. I mentioned the $1 billion jewelry brand that we're working with. And the reason that I mentioned they're a $1 billion jewelry brand is not to say, oh, I'm working with a $1 billion jewelry brand. It's actually to say that even though they're that size, the things that we're investigating with them is what is it that customers want, and what customers really want is the making of stories. Like, how do you make this jewelry? Why do you care about it? How do you pick your designers? They want to know how you think, and they want to know what sits behind what you do, because personalization that we were speaking about earlier is becoming much more about, does this match my way of how I see the world, right? And then when you throw in climate change and things like that, there's a lot of things going on in the world where people are just saying, how does this work? Why does this work? Does it match the way that I work? And if it doesn't, I'm not going to touch it because I don't care about it. Even though they've got the coolest jumper that I've ever seen, I'm not going to do it. And that's where I think you start to see indicators that say that, well, what should the change be? And the change should be, you make more sales by entertaining people, and you entertain people by showing people, here's our efficacy. Here's how our process works. Here's why we love the design that we do. And some of the success that I've had, I do a lot of mentoring of small businesses just as a free thing. And one of the things that we always get them to do, they fall into a trap. They try and copy big businesses. What we do with their CRM is their CRM always goes out from their name. So Dale at whatever company, right?
Yeah.
And they get responses back, and they ask questions in the email. And it's amazing for sales, but it's amazing for how you connect with people. And that's loyalty, and loyalty creates sales. Loyalty is a behavior and a feeling. It's not how much money you spend.
Okay.
Love that.
Do you want to add to it, Neil, at all? Or?
Did I mention the brand Absolute Collagen earlier?
No,
And we're talking about brands that do CX well. It's just something you said there, Martin, that they did really well, and they've built Absolute Collagen, huge, fast-growing business in the UK, very, very focused on customer service, and that is because the whole brand was built on almost what you just said, like the founder sending emails to people, building.
I think I read
asking
this.
Questions.
Yeah.
And that still continues to be their philosophy today.
Doesn't the founder email personally loads of, or responds personally? Yeah. I did say I've read this somewhere. Yeah, fantastic. I mean, arguably, we've done loads of webinars this year and in-person events. Arguably, this potentially could be the most important one, really, because it is all about the customer, isn't it, really? You know, and that's the thing I think sometimes perhaps we all lose track of. When we're, embroiled in the whole thing like sell, build the brand, build the customer database. We've got 5 minutes left. Just if there's anything you want people to remember from this session, what would you say is, Martin, your sort of takeaway tips?
Just go human first. Whatever you're going to do, just think about the human at the other side of it. But actually, the way that I've started to do that is because people get all confused and they're like, well, I've got a million different customers and there's a million different ways that they could think, right? So I just say to them is, you as a consumer, how do you want to be treated? Start there, whichever area you're working at. Keep it that simple. And then you'll be halfway towards where you need to be. And then you can start segmenting and things like that. But you just, the people are still looking for this magic invention of one trick or tool or piece of technology that's going to solve all their problems. And I had a recent example of a tool called DCO, which is dynamic content optimization. And the customer said the tool's absolute garbage. You put in 6 types of creative and 6 types of copy, and it makes 2,500 versions of the advert, and it tells us which one's best. Why doesn't it work? And I said, because your creative and copy's crap. Because they didn't understand their customers. It wasn't the tool, and it often isn't the tool.
It's the message, I guess. Neil, what few things would you what's your takeaway tips? A few things that you would like people to at least remember from this session?
On a basic level,
just
like get the basics right. Focus on maybe 1 or 2 key metrics that you want to improve within your business that you know aren't great. And if you ask most business owners, without looking at any data, just a feeling that they have, when it comes to customer service, what isn't quite working well, they will know. So focus on a couple of things, and then implement some basic strategies to improve them. And then from there, start to evolve. So things like, where is my order? Like that's one of the most common questions in e-commerce. If we can reduce the number of people asking that question, then brands are free to deal with much more complex queries.
Fantastic. And I don't know if both of you just want to leave a contact email or a web address again in the chat box. Mia, if you're listening in, do you want to just share the link again for the meeting after this? And like I say, all of you guys listening in on this, if you want to come and say a quick hello to Neil, myself, Martin, and obviously there'll be some colleagues from both the Fashion Network, but also the e-commerce club. So I'll leave the link in there for a little bit. I'd just like to thank you guys for your time today, for speaking. Martin, I really appreciate the insights. Neil, appreciate the insights, and appreciate the fact that Gorgias is supporting this session. I will chat to you in a minute. You're very welcome, chaps. So I'll catch you in the after session in a minute. So you've got the link here, guys. So I'll see you in a bit. So thanks, guys. Appreciate all that, and thanks for the guys asking questions in the audience. Cheers.